Well, as those negotiations continue, the humanitarian situation in the Gaza Strip remains dire, even as more aid enters the besieged territory in recent days. Aid's continuing to trickle into the Strip via airdrops, while on Wednesday, Israel reopened the only border crossing into northern Gaza for aid. Now, humanitarian groups have been urging Israeli authorities to let supplies enter via the Erez crossing for months. The UN has warned repeatedly that Gazans are desperately short of food and other essential supplies, with northern Gaza in particular on the brink of famine. Well, British surgeon Mr. Khaled Dawas has just returned from his second visit to Gaza since the war started. He's been working with the emergency medical teams from the International Rescue Committee and Medical Aid for Palestinians. Welcome to DW. We'll come to what you saw and experienced in a moment. First, though, tell us, please, what made you decide to leave your practice in London and head to a war zone?
The pictures that we all saw, I think the suffering that we see on TV and that we'd heard stories about were a great pull. I've been going to Gaza for a number of years as a chair of an educational charity that works with the medical schools in Palestine overall. And when this happened, clearly there was a big draw. I took my annual leave from work and decided to go for a couple of weeks in December, January, and then I went again back in April. I think when you go there, you realize what the need is. It's huge, and anything that I can do, and many of my colleagues feel the same way, we would be more than happy to provide.
And so you said that obviously you've been watching and monitoring events closely. Did what you'd seen on the television prepare you for what you actually experienced?
No, not at all. I think the pictures are always a little bit sanitized. The real picture is very difficult to see live or recorded. We saw a lot of social media posts about this, but also, more than anything else, it's actually what people tell you when you go there, and the stories you get from talking to the patients that we had to deal with and their relatives as to what they're going through is certainly much worse than I'd expected. And
what did they tell you? Draw us into this picture.
So the stories, particularly from patients I spoke to and their relatives, were stories, for example, of trying to regain some dignity. It was all about really regaining some dignity. People wanted to go back to their homes that are inevitably, in many cases, destroyed. One of the cases is of a young man who worked with us when I was there in April. He was our helper. He would look after our things in our room in the hospital, because we stayed in the hospital for the whole time for 12 days. He went back to find his home in Khan Yunis after the Israeli forces left, and was distraught one morning coming in to say that his house, which he'd bought only just before October, was completely destroyed. Stories of people traveling to pick up their belongings and trying to find out what's left of their homes, and then being targeted and killed on their way to their homes, and we therefore receive them as patients. People who are sheltering in schools, who happened to be in the school when it was hit, and we receive the whole family as casualties, either dead or injured. I talked to people like the ones who were wrapping bodies in the hospital of the dead. I spoke to the man who wrapped the bodies of the World Central Kitchen staff who were killed only 2 days before we arrived. So these stories are a myriad of really tragedy, right, and stuff that you really don't come across in your normal life.
According to the International Rescue Committee, only 12 of Gaza's 36 hospitals are even partially functioning. How did you decide where to go and how you could most make yourself useful?
It was a very important point for us when we went in, particularly initially in January, but also back in April, as to where we would end up going. Now, it's a complex equation. Our entry into Gaza is determined by the Israeli authorities, but also by Egypt. And then the Palestinian Health Ministry will tell us where the most need is. But again, our movement is very much controlled by COGAT, the Israeli authorities, as to where we can go and how we can move. And so our aim was to go to a hospital which was in need of medical attention, emergency medical teams. The Al-Aqsa hospital that we went to in Deir al-Balah in the center had that need. There are teams that go to the other major hospital, the European hospital. And I would just add that though the numbers we talk about, there being maybe 10 hospitals which are still functioning, these are not really hospitals. These are what we would call in the UK clinics, or perhaps glorified general practice surgeries. These don't work as hospitals. The only real hospitals that have a unit are two.
And so how do you carry out medical procedures in a war zone? What happens when the bombs start dropping? Do you have enough medical supplies to actually do your job properly?
You adapt. You have to adapt. And I think like any war situation, one has to be very adapting and also learn from the local teams who tell us how they've been working for the last 6 or 7 months. So no, I did not have all the equipment that I would normally have in my practice in the UK, but I'm a surgeon who deals with the abdomen, the guts, the chest, and I can make do with things. I have enough experience to make do with things. But is it ideal? No, it's not. As a consequence, all the patients that we had wound infections after the surgery, without exception. And these wound infections are awful. They can affect your survival. But also, we were reusing equipment that was designed for single use. Equipment that was donated in some cases by other teams that come in, and we were using them 10, 20 times. These are designed for single use, and they were not being sterilized because the sterilization facilities are not up to scratch and not working in the way they should do.
And so will you go back?
I hope I do. My aim, and as I said this to my colleagues as I was leaving, and I left with a heavy heart really, because I felt a lot of guilt leaving, knowing that I can leave, and leaving them. I said I would come back, of course, but I really hope that I come back in the time when the ceasefire, a permanent ceasefire, is in place.
Thank you for sharing your insights with us. British surgeon Khaled Dawas, a recent return from Gaza. Thank you so much.
Thank you.